and welcome to Forbidden Planet TV. And on today's extra special episode, we have Stephanie Garber to talk all things Alchemy of Secrets. Hello, Stephanie.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Very, very, very excited to be here on this. I don't know what the weather's like where you are. We've got a very dull day here in the UK. So
Yes, it is right now. It's like 8 a.m., but it's very gray. And I think we're
okay.
supposed to rain, which we don't usually get much rain in September, so I'm very thankful for. Where I live, it's quite dry. So I'm like, it feels like fall has crept in like earlier than usual. And I'm
Uh,
here for it.
okay, okay. Well, if you don't get much rain there, your UK tour kicks off quite soon. So
Yes.
get your bumper crop of rain. But what is I'm always intrigued about authors like morning rituals. So what's your kind of morning ritual?
It kind of depends. There's like two different versions. No, three different versions. So it's like when I'm working on a new book, when I'm drafting, I feel like mornings are the best time to write. And so I really try to like not check my email. I like to wake up. I like to eat breakfast. I like to go for a walk, and then I'll try to write for the first half of the day if I'm like in drafting mode. I have a book coming out next week. So right now it is very much like I wake up and see a mountain of email and I read through it. And then like some of it I'll reply to immediately. I feel like, especially like having UK publishers and living on the West Coast in the US, I feel perpetually behind. Like I wake up and the day is almost over and I'm just like trying to like jam out emails really quick. So right now it's very much like waking up to a lot of email. Today I have this interview, and then after this, I'm gonna go to like my local bookstore and sign a bunch of stock um,
Yay.
to get ready for my event next week, and then it'll be social media in the afternoon. So that's kind of like my pre-publication schedule, where it's lots of like working on logistics and promotion, and then and it's very fun. But I'm looking forward to like returning from tour and just kind of like becoming like a little hobbit and staying in my hobbit hole and writing my books.
Yes, yes. It's nice to have, I suppose, that balance. Like you're crazy busy and out there meeting people and doing stuff, but then you've got to like the batteries are drained, right? A bit.
Yes, yeah, which is why I don't try to do it all. Like on a week like this, as much as I would love to write, I'm like, I'll be on plenty of airplanes and trains and I can put my words out then.
Yay. So, what can you tell us about your new book, Alchemy of Secrets, that's obviously very, very soon to be out on bookshelves all across the land?
Yes. Okay. So Alchemy of Secrets comes out next week on October 7th. And it is a supernatural thriller that I've written about a young graduate student who's never met a rabbit hole she wouldn't like to fall down. And after becoming obsessed with a class on myths and legends, she discovers that one of the urban legends she's learned about is actually true when a man tells her that she's going to die on the following day. This sets her off on a deadly and magical treasure hunt through the heart of Los Angeles, which enmeshes her in a magical world and in between multiple very dangerous men who she's not sure she can trust. It's a lot of, feel like it's like dark academia colliding with old Hollywood. And then really fast pacing because I like a book that keeps turning pages, and it's definitely like a nod to like older urban fantasy and paranormal romance, which is what got me to start reading.
Oh my God. And this is something I really loved. And I've loved there's been a couple of books recently that are kind of bringing like urban fantasy never quite went away. And like with Holly Black's newest series and stuff, I'm just loving that we're back with urban fantasy. Yes.
But it is my favorite. Like I love urban fantasy. I love paranormal romance, but I didn't want to do it. And like, it's funny because in the UK, I think my books have always been published as adult, but in the
Yes.
US, yeah, in the US, they've been published as young adult. And I didn't want to do that for an urban fantasy. One, because I feel like I'm too old now, but two, I feel like I wouldn't know how to write present day high schoolers because I'm so far removed from that, and so it made more sense to write like adults.
Yes, yeah, and having the dark academia kind of vibes, because there's something so kind of, yeah, rich and about the whole universe. So has this the idea for the book, has this been with you for a little while, and it's finally kind of time to come out?
Yes, yes. I sold the book back in 2020.
Mhm.
So it was over 5 years ago that we pitched the idea and sold it. And at the time, it was a very different idea.
Right.
Um, I feel like it was just, it was that very before and after period where I pitched the book. I talked to my agent about it in February of 2020. And then um, when we sold it in the US, literally it was that next Monday that like offices were closed, everything shut down. And I remember like when I came up with the concept, I was like, oh my gosh, I could just fly to Los Angeles. It's only like an hour away. It'll be so easy to research this book. And then the world shifted. And a lot of, when I was working on another series, the Once Upon a Broken Heart series at
Mhm.
this time, and I'd had this really, like, I thought I was so smart. I was like, I'm going to write 2 books in that series, and then I'm going to write this book, as a way to like pull in new readers, and then I'll finish the Once Upon a Broken Heart series.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't know if you're familiar with that series, but the second book has like a cliffhanger that left people really mad at me. So that I would never recover if like I wrote another book and did not finish that series.
Mm.
So we put off Alchemy, but I've been working on it off and on for the last. It took me 5 years off and on to write this book.
Wow. And do you find, I know that you mentioned before that this is kind of classed as your first adult in the US. Did your kind of mind have to shift? Did you kind of approach it differently to your other books in any way? Or was it kind of the same process and research and
In some ways, I did it exactly the same, and in some
okay.
ways, I approached it differently. So for me, I feel like writing wise, I approached it really similar to how I would with a YA. I think this book
Mhm.
reads a little differently because there are second person chapters, which were fun for me to play around in a different thing. So like with some of the narrative stuff, I tried new things, but I wasn't like, I don't take myself very seriously, and I didn't wanna do that thing where I'm like, "I'm writing an adult novel, and I can't have humor or fun or this or that." I was just like, "No, my characters are older. My
Mm.
characters are older." Like, that was the one of the big primary things that separates it, but then I think the other thing was just more that I decided to go urban fantasy,
Mm.
paranormal romance, supernatural thriller. I really wanted it to feel like The Da Vinci Code meets A Discovery of Witches. So, it's very, like, world building, plot forward, like, I want readers feeling like they're stepping in to this magical version of Los Angeles that feels more technicolor than the real world. And it feels like if you just go in the right shop or down the right alley, you're gonna find magic. Um,
Yes.
and then it has romance, but my other books were very romance forward.
Right.
And this has more like the approach is a little like I'm glad readers like seem to be here for it, the early ones, because it's very much like, wait, who's the love interest? It's not so much love triangle as like I throw in a lot of options because, like, I really wanted everything about this book to be mysterious, and I'm like,
Mm.
"I don't even want you to know who the love interest is." 'Cause I think it's fun to pick up a book and not know.
Mm.
I also I love a romance novel. I love that, like, knowing that these characters, like, how are they ever gonna get together? But I like the idea of being like, you don't actually know who she can trust and who she can't, and it's less of like, "Who am I gonna choose?" and more like, which guy is, like, not gonna kill me?" sort of situation. And so the romance was really, really different, and it was different for me to write a book that was less romance forward.
Mm.
And I feel like that's, in YA fantasy, that is what readers really, really want. And I felt like the freedom to like step back a little from this and make it more of this like pacey thriller book, which is what I really love to read.
Yes.
So that was like I think the biggest shift was just in like pacing and plot and how I was weaving the story together, but I
Mm.
wasn't necessarily like, this is adult. I need to grow up because I'm just never going to grow up. I'm like the same person. So I think my readers who've read my other books will see a lot of similarities.
Mm.
Um, I feel like there's still like my quirky magic and I think it's a lot of fun and it's dark, but don't worry, everything's pretty, like people might be dying, there might be blood, but don't worry, someone like attractive is going to swoop in there. And if they make it better, at least it's going to be fun to read.
Yes, yeah. There's definite darkness, but there is a lot of humor. There is kind of a lot of heart there. And talking like you mentioned the mysteries of the book. So you have obviously the professor that kind of disappears. You also have a sister who you don't really know. There's so many things that you're kind of setting up this really big picture. How kind of difficult is that to be like, okay, I'm gonna store that away for a later date?
It was, you know what? It was really challenging. I feel like um I had a lot of false starts for this book.
Mm,
And so I like the original pitch was completely different. Instead of having like a mysterious professor, my main character had like worked for a mysterious author who was writing this book and then she died and it was a story that I think is a little more familiar in this one. I I think it was just I had more time to think about it and I really like carved away the things that I didn't like. And when I brought in the sister, I actually knew this is the start of a new series. And so I knew the sister wasn't going to show up in this book. That the sister, and I don't feel like that's a spoiler. Like everyone has a lot of questions, but um, so I think that one was easy for me because I knew who the sister was right away. Like she was
mm,
one of those characters who came in like fully fleshed out for me. I think it was harder to just kind of like have a new world. Like I
mm,
had been playing in the same universe for like a decade. And so suddenly I'm building this new world. And I love world building. I love magic. I love writing books that make people feel they're in this other place. And so I think it was more like that first, like if you've ever been to Disneyland and say you're there, like, and you just get there and it's like, oh my gosh, what do I do first? Where do I go? How are we going to plan our day? You have that like excitement and like trying to figure out what to do. And I think that was more the feeling of like,
mm.
do I lean into the myths and magic? Do I lean into the romance? Like what do I lean into most? Like what am I exploring in this book? What is that thread that's going to tie everything together? Because I felt like there were so many different angles and there were different, there was a lot of deleted material for this book. Because there were more like these second person chapters are all focusing on the folklore 517 class. And originally I had even more about like facets within it. So it was
Mm.
different POVs, not just the class. And so it was like paring back so I could figure out what kind of story I was saying was more of like, was the biggest challenge for me in writing.
I think there's even just a wonderful kind of chaos for the idea of the lectures and the fact it's not just in the same lecture hall every day that you always have to go. I mean, it would be chaotic if that was done at actual universities and colleges and you had to kind of figure out way. But yeah, it's just incredible like how it's kind of thought through in that way. Was there a particular experience from your kind of academic life and previous kind of life that made you kind of want to have that dark academia element to the book?
I think I put a lot of myself and my life in my books, and I used to teach creative writing. I actually have like a master's in higher education. So before becoming a writer, that I worked in higher ed, which is funny. 'Cause, like I had to remind myself, like, oh wait, I can do this. I know a little something about this. And so and I worked like my two jobs, I worked in higher ed on the co-curricular side.
Mm,
And I was a resident director and director of orientation. And that orientation was very much like we did things like planning elaborate scavenger hunts and events. And then I taught this night class that was from 7 to 9:40. And it was creative writing. And so I think part of it did come from like, experience in that vein and I loved working in college. Like I actually thought I was going to keep teaching even after I started writing because I loved working with students and the idea of like like the thing about college is like sometimes you take a class and it literally changes your life.
mm.
And I think that's, some people go in knowing what they want to do, and some people discover it when they take a class that they find fascinating. And so I liked the idea of this class being something that's so compelling. It's changed the life of the student. And I also like the idea of, I really love urban myths and legends, like really love them. Like, I think it's so, it's like writing and living in the space with like fantasy and sci-fi and all of that. You love to wonder like, what are the bounds of reality? And I love the idea of a class that questions that, and making the class feel like an urban myth. Like, I really like doubling down on everything. It's like, let's, not just have this class that's teaching these urban myths, but like, let's go with this theme and make it actually feel like it's an urban myth, so that if you get into this class, you feel like you're a part of the myth, you feel like you're part of the legend. So I think it came from like working at a college, but then also like really liking the theme and being like, let's go hard in here.
And there's definite, it's a perfect time of year to be talking about the book because it is very Halloweeny. There is I was reminded a little bit of things like and I'm trying not to kind of give too much away, but like some of the films like Happy Death Day and all those kind of things where you have the idea of loops of repetition of not quite knowing what's going on. Are you kind of a fan of some of the scary stuff out there? Do you watch scary films and stuff, or is it just
No, I
happy?
don't.
You don't.
I'm not. I don't watch anything that's like horror. I am a big fan of like right now I'm doing my like rewatch of the Vampire Diaries because I love.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
So
Yep.
I'm much more of like the urban fantasy paranormal, like Vampire Diaries, Buffy the Vampire Slayer,
Mhm.
the originals and legacies, and like all the DC shows. Like, if there's like a superhero show, but I think like two of my favorites are Vampire Diaries and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And I think I was maybe trying to capture some of that feeling. I feel like they're both really great atmospheric fall shows. Um,
Yes.
and they have such interesting bits of magic. Like, I love how, since they were pre-streaming, they were the show. Like, Buffy was definitely that show that had like an overarching plot, but then it had a lot of episodic episodes where you're being introduced to like strange villains and bits of magic. And so I was more feeling like trying to tie in those types of things. Like, you have a world with this, my character has a mission, she needs to accomplish this, but then also wanting to bring in little bits of the world and little bits of magic that make you feel like this is kind of um an amusement park you wanna play in as an adult.
Yeah, no, definitely. And you have kind of, rather than having, I don't know, like the villain of the week, that obviously things like Buffy and stuff quite often would have reoccurring, people like that. You do have that element of the alchemical heart, the thing that everyone's kind of searching for. So where did that idea come from for you?
Um, so I think it was interesting. I think when I started writing the book, there were a couple things. Like, when I first did the pitch and we came up with the title, we came up with the title Alchemy of Secrets when it was just a pitch. And it was very much, instead of being obsessed with myths and legends, there were a lot of like symbols and this whole language of symbols. And then that switched to myths and legends, but I bought a ton of books to research for this. So I bought a book about symbols. Like, I have a whole book on like, thousands of symbols and just across the world and over time. And so looking at the symbol book, I think is kind of like, that's where I took all the symbols that make up the alchemical heart. But I think the alchemical heart just sounded cool. Like, I like the word alchemy, and then I was like, let's, alchemical symbols, alchemical heart. Like, it just seemed like I was playing around with like a lot of symbols when I was first writing the book, and I ended up drawing the symbol for the alchemical heart, which is in the UK uses a lot, and like it's like on the front of their books, and then they just came up with these little pins that readers can get for tour stops, and if they buy the book at the store and different things. So I thought it was just like cool looking symbol.
Yeah, so yeah, it's very steampunky, kind of gothicy. Yeah, yeah, it perfectly suits the book. So yeah, 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 no, it's great. So I'm just looking at my notes. So it's quite funny when I make notes on when I'm doing interviews. The more chaotic my notes are, the more I enjoyed the book, and my notes are
Oh,
kind of all over the place.
I love that.
You're just like it's almost like reading back doctor's handwriting or something. That you're just like, oh, I don't know what. But yes, yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about the other characters, and indeed, actually, Holland St. James herself. So, was she one of those characters that came to you fully formed, or did she kind of move and change as you were kind of working through the book?
Yeah, you know what's it's funny, my main characters never come fully formed. Like I think I didn't understand Holland until I gave her a twin sister. So she didn't have she didn't have a sister in every draft, and it wasn't until she had a twin sister. And then I really I knew she was obsessed with this class on Myth and Legend, but then I don't think this spoils too much because you find this out pretty early on. When you find out about her father and that her father would do all these treasure hunts, that was like the piece that helped make sense
Mhm.
of Holland's character and knowing that she was raised on treasure hunts and she was raised to look at the world through this particular lens. And she also deeply loves her father. So I think the combination of her father and then her sister helped piece her together because her sister January is, her name is January. And part of the reason is because she's colder, she's colder, she's more jaded. She sees the world as this kind of frightening place that she needs to protect her starry-eyed sister from. And
Mm.
Holland is starry-eyed. She sees the world, I think, probably the same way I do, and that it's you know, there's just a perpetual technicolor filter over her as she meets people and looks for things. And, she chooses to be hopeful. She chooses to be adventurous. And those are all traits, a lot of the traits in her are traits I have, which is something I do on purpose because I'm I know how to write this character. And I know how to write this experience. But I think the big piece for Holland was really figuring out her relationship with her dad and how that's influenced her choices when it comes to schooling and job and how she sees the world. And I think part of that was I'm really close. I have amazing parents. I'm really close to them. And in 2020, when everything shut down, I went and stayed with them for a while. And I just sold this book. And my dad and and it had a little different bend. And I was like, Dad, we need to watch a bunch of old movies. And so we watched old movies, we talked about films and, spent a lot of time also talking about that book. And I've always been close to my dad, but I think it was especially being there during that time that influenced me to make it more of you know, a book that my dad has more influence. And I dedicated it to him. And he kept saying, don't write this for me. Don't write this for me. I'm not your audience, which, I think this is my book where it's I am trying to branch out and get a wider audience. So I'm no, you are everyone's the audience for this book. But also I was I wanted to put some dad things in there.
Yeah, no, it definitely comes across. There's a lot of love in that family, even some clashes sometimes. Obviously,
Yeah.
hey, families, but yeah, a lot of love. It definitely comes across. So,
Oh,
um,
cool. Yeah.
the other obviously very interesting character of the professor, and obviously how you have the kind of the lectures that almost kind of intersperse the book. So yeah, was that kind of again a character that came to you fully formed, and obviously what happens to the professor? No spoilers, but yeah.
Yeah. So right away I knew early on when writing this book that my main character was going to have a mentor figure.
Mm.
And originally in the pitch when I sold the book, the mentor was this famous reclusive author. Um, but then that storyline, it felt like something that I was familiar in other stories. And I also, I don't know exactly when I started writing the myths and legends and decided this is the route I want to go. So I always knew it was going to be, I always knew Holland was going to have a very interesting mentor character. And I think
Mm.
I like mentor characters, and I've been fortunate in my life to have some really incredible female mentors, especially within academia.
Mhm.
So I think there's probably part of that that came. None of them were like mysterious like the professor, but I definitely like the idea of I think in all my books I do this with a lot of characters where I do like to make the reader wonder like, is this character good or bad and can they be trusted and can our main character's perception of them be trusted? So with the professor, it was very much like, okay, this is how Holland feels about her. This is how I'm showing you in this, second person perspective where you experience her lecture. So you get to kind of see and hopefully make sense of yourself what you think of the professor and then kind of decide what you think. So I do like to try and write these characters where they're not black and white if they're good or evil or if they can be trusted. Because I like to make readers wonder, like, what do they think? I think it makes the reading experience richer because it feels like you're more in an experience when you feel like you're not being told how to feel. It's like 'cause that's life. Like you're just experiencing things. So the professor, I'd say like the core parts of her were there when I started, whether she was an author or a professor, but then I developed her more and more. Even as the book goes on, like there's something that I don't want to spoil, but I'll just say I didn't know that that happened until I wrote it on paper.
Mm. Right. um, Well, I found another thing I found quite interesting, and I think I've maybe seen or heard an interview with you before where you were saying about how I think Alice in Wonderland is quite an influence, and you love. There's a series, isn't there, that's like an Alice kind of based on Alice in Wonderland, like a YA series that I think you've mentioned in a previous interview, and this definitely gives kind of falling through the falling down the rabbit hole kind of vibes. Is there any other things that kind of have influenced your writing, whether it's kind of books or
Oh, yeah.
films or
It's funny because I a lot of people compare this to Alice in Wonderland, and I didn't really think of that as I wrote this book. I have as I've been working on the sequel, which is interesting because I
okay.
feel like there's like some very like a blatant Alice references in the sequel. I think I was more influenced by just like a lot of the like paranormal urban fantasy books. I One of my favorite series is like the Dark Fever series by Karen Marie Moning. I'm
Yes.
familiar with that series. Um, I haven't read the whole series because it's like it started as 5 books and she expanded for that. But I just kept with the first 5 because I loved them so much.
Mm.
And so it was definitely, it's this murder mystery book where the main character's sister goes missing and then she gets involved with this mysterious man and you don't know if he's a love interest or not. Like you don't know what's going on at first. Like there's just a lot of mystery and magic. And I feel like stories like that just like captured my heart because I love the wonder. So I think there were stories like that. Another big one for me was the Da Vinci Code.
Mm.
I like reread the book and then I watched Dan Brown's masterclass because that, I read that long before I started writing and it's just a fantastic read, it was a read that, like, me and everyone I knew was reading, and it was just so compulsive, and it made you feel like you were learning stuff as you were reading,
Mm.
and it just was that, like, really fun treasure hunt sort of story, and so I think I've just been craving that because I love a thriller, but as I said before, I stay away from anything that's kinda scary, like, I just I'm a I'm a very soft, fluffy person, and so even though I can like write people like dying and stuff in my books, I'm like, yeah, but I want it to feel more like a Da Vinci Code or Indiana Jones or
Mm.
um, National Treasure sort of story where it's like fun and adventurous and just like candy.
Yes. I mean, there's something about books like The Da Vinci Code, whether you love them or hate them, they are like still hugely popular. And,
Yeah.
for especially kind of like holiday reads and you just want something you get lost in, like on a train journey or something, there is something about those fast-paced thrillers, the likable hero. Yeah, there's something definitely. Um Another thing that's obviously really, really interesting and I loved, and I'm sure there's probably a lot of research that went into this, is that kind of almost old Hollywood, like 1920s, 30s kind of period of history. Is that a particular kind of favorite period for you? And did that kind of figure into your research?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you mentioned it because there's so much research that I could not put in the book. Like I went down that rabbit hole for sure. I have like stacks of books on like old Hollywood, on film noir, on like the paranormal and occult in old Hollywood, old Hollywood murders, like just you know, I find all that stuff fascinating. And I think that I knew I wanted to set the book in LA, and I kind of like to have like a in my first series, the Caraval series, like everything centered around a game. So everything kind of went back to like the game, and even just like the imagery, the way I wrote that book, it was all game, game, game. And then my second series, the Once Upon a Broken Heart series, I wanted it to feel like this new fairy tale I was creating. So everything about it, again, all went back to fairy tales, from the names of the towns and the characters and the way the magic moved. It was all, let's make this feel like a fairy tale. And so for this book, I really was like, I knew I wanted it to be set in LA, but I didn't want it to be real LA. I was like, yes, I'm writing a modern day book, but I wanted it to feel more like the way, like I wanted to feel like old Hollywood LA. I wanted to feel like something that you can only experience in your imagination. Because I love that feeling. Like I lived in Southern California a while. I've lived in California for my whole life. So like this is my home, and I used to go to Disneyland all the time. Like when I lived in California, I was really close. My roommates and I, passes were cheap and we had them. And I love how like you go into like California Adventure or Disneyland, like California Adventure especially has that old Hollywood feeling. And I just love it. I just think it's really magical. So I knew that even as I was writing this book, I wanted it to be I wanted it to feel like Los Angeles, but not the real version. I wanted it like a heightened reality version of it. And then I think for my main character, like really looking at her and her interests and how her father was involved in film. So she loves movies, and then she, has this job where she teaches old film. And so like it didn't end up playing, like her knowledge of film didn't end up playing into the book as much as I thought it would. Like there's a number of Easter eggs, but, like, I did a lot of research. I read, and there also because I think, and the other thing that I ended up doing, because I thought that, there's, like, this whole mythology about, like, deals with the devil, and Hollywood
Mm.
wasn't built on dreams, it was built on deals with the devil, and there's a lot of really interesting old there's a lot of interesting stories. There's a lot of
Mm.
deaths that it's like, did the police plant this? Did the movie studio plant this? Like, what really happened if you look at these old mysteries? But as I was looking at things, I realized that like some of these people probably still have family members that are alive and they didn't die too long ago. It was mid 20th century. And so I didn't, I didn't mention real people. And I kind of like tried to use names that might sound like people, but it just felt like something I ended up not wanting to touch on.
Mm.
Because I wanted to be sensitive to that. And but I think it did help inform me in just like understanding like what this world was, and like it was
Mm.
wild to me, like the corruption and like the police department, all this stuff. But then also it helped me understand like too, even just like Holland talks about like how she's writing this thesis on deals with the devil, and she would have to step away from it periodically because the research was so dark. And I felt like that. Like it was really like there's, yes, a lot of salacious and fascinating stories, but I felt like my heart breaking as I was reading about these deaths and these tragedies and these like starlets who had these incredible careers. And, you read about someone like Clara Bow and your heart breaks.
Mm.
And so it was understanding, like getting a deeper understanding of names that you hear a lot in pop culture. And so a lot of it didn't make it into the book, but
Mm.
hopefully hopefully there's like this like layer that you can't see beneath the surface that you maybe kind of feel, because I feel like I tried to get a lot of the same knowledge that I think my main character would have.
Mm. Yeah, it's a fascinating period of history, isn't it? And obviously, you mentioned an actress there, but obviously Marilyn Monroe, various other actresses who, yeah, I don't know, maybe got kind of poured into the system in a way, and it's it's crazy, and it is something that's kind of reflected in your book, that there's an undercurrent. There's stuff going on kind of underneath, and there's people like the Watchman and stuff who's maybe more aware of some of those strings being pulled, which is so interesting. So but yeah, I suppose maybe you can use some of that research at a later point.
Yeah, and even if I can't, I feel like it helps me just get a better understanding of the world. Like,
Mm,
I also went on various research trips. I feel like I've watched various like other master classes, and
mm,
I remember watching one that David Baldacci did, and I don't remember, it was so long ago. I don't remember if he just mentioned or if he actually pulled out this notebook. He's like, this is how much research I do, and this is how much makes it in the story. And so I think it makes sense to like have that knowledge so that I feel like, hey, if you I don't open this door in this book. I have it here. But if you were to open it, there would be something on the other side. Like it's a real door. It's not like a cardboard cutout. So I like to think that even though I don't go into depth on things, um, like for example, there's one moment where we go to the professor's office and there's a lot that I could have said about
mm,
her paraphernalia that I didn't because it just didn't fit with the story, but just trying to like know that it's like there were all these things and I don't mention what they are. Like if you went into Holland's house, I feel like it's a fully furnished house. It's not just
mm.
something that like if we went beyond, we don't go that deep into Holland's house. We're just kind of like in the guest room and the front stairs. But if you went deeper into the house,
Mm.
you would see everything on the walls. I like to feel like that I did all the research so I know like what
Yes.
characters love and what would be in these various places.
Oh, yes, yeah. There is something I think that probably makes us all kind of readers, because you read a book like Alchemy of Secrets and then you want to go and do all this research and find out all these things. So yeah, mission accomplished.
Oh, good. And that was my goal. It was very much I hope that people would want to like be like, is some of this real? Like what did she make up and what is actually based on history?
Definitely. And so coming towards the end of our interview today, so my last question is always kind of the same, so we'll save that. But it's always quite interesting to see what people are kind of watching and reading and stuff. But what's next for you? So after your tour and you get back to the States, what's next?
I'm working on the sequel. So I have it all
Perfect.
outlined. I've started writing it. I've written there will be second person chapters in this sequel. They're not going to be classes. It's something else that I'm very, very excited about. But so I'm just gonna get to work on the sequel when I get home.
Oh, okay, exciting. So yes, so we've got book two at least, if not more, to look forward to. So
Yes,
exciting.
exactly. Yes.
And for your last kind of interview question, so what are you currently reading, watching, and if you game, what are you playing?
Okay, that's a great question. So I just started reading Broken Country.
Uh,
uh,
okay, yeah.
And like a lot of my everyone had been telling me how great it was, so I started reading that. But then I also got Secret of Secrets by Dan Brown. It just showed up.
Yes.
Me and one of my best friends started a book club at the beginning of the year, and this is our book club pick for next month. Um, so I have both of those, and I'm kind of trying to figure out like, do I which one will I like? Do I try and finish one before our tour? Do I take one on tour? So those are the books I'm reading. I'm currently rewatching Vampire Diaries. And then I'm also watching Mr. Robot. So
Okay, yeah.
yeah, I never watched it. My boyfriend's like, you need to see this. Like the plot twists are gonna make you a better writer. So I'm like, okay, well, I can't say no to that. So like I'm kind of like going between the two shows. Because I've seen Vampire Diaries like more times than I can count. And then I'm not a gamer, so which is good because I'm like I feel like between the books and the shows, I'm like okay, have to actually do some work in there.
Yes, it does take it takes up a lot of time. It's a great stress reliever, but yeah, you can lose days. So yes, yeah, we want to keep those books coming. So
Yes, we do.
But yeah, thank you, Stephanie, so much for joining us today. And for anyone tuning in at home, we have got signed copies of Alchemy of Secrets about to drop in our warehouse any day soon. So everyone at home and anyone who's at Comic Con as well. And obviously, hopefully, at some point we can have you in person at Comic Con, which
I would love that. I would love that.
so yes, yeah, just putting it out there in the ether. But yes, yeah. So for everyone watching at home, we will see you next time. But definitely pick up a copy of Alchemy of Secrets. It's amazing.
Thank you. Thank you so much for reading, and thank you for having me on
Oh,
here today.
thank you very much. We will see you next time.
If you're enjoying watching Forbidden Planet TV and you're enjoying watching us talk to the world's most interesting and accomplished filmmakers, authors, artists, musicians, creators, subscribe right here. See you soon.